Welcome to the Travis Masterbone podcast. I am your host, Travis Masterbone, talking some shit to impact your life. This is episode 24, titled Coleman Hughes and Color Blindness. Quote, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. End quote. MLK Jr. I feel like I shouldn't even have to say that quote. It's so drilled in our brains since we were young. But in this day and age, I feel like that quote is really, really fading into the distance. And I'm talking about Coleman Hughes because I stumbled upon his appearance on the show called The View. In my personal opinion, it is a terrible show, and for many reasons. And one of them is for this reason right here, on how they treated Mr. Hughes, and more specifically, one individual that's always on that panel. But we are about to get into all that. But first and foremost, who is Coleman Hughes? He is the author of the book, The End of Race Politics. Born in 1996, younger gentleman, American writer, podcast host of his podcast, Conversations with Coleman Hughes. He was a fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research and a fellow and contributing editor at their city journal. And he's an independent, and in my opinion, the definition of a true moderate, maybe slightly leaning right on some issues, and in particular, the topic of today dealing with race for sure, in my opinion. And he also works for CNN. So I feel like he's a pretty neutral, intelligent individual. I love his podcasts. I love his interviews. Go look him up if you haven't heard of him. And he also makes some pretty phenomenal rap music. I will refer that and link that and say some lyrics for you today that really correlate with what we're talking about, no doubt. And so let's get to it. His appearance on The View not too long ago. We know who's on that panel, right? We got Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Sonny Austin will be our highlight today. But Whoopi Goldberg opens up asking Mr. Hughes to define color blindness through his perspective. And this is very true that he has a perspective of this because other people have different ways of looking at this. And so his definition of it, quote, a lot of people quote color blindness to, I don't see race. I think that's a big mistake. We all see race and are all capable of being racially biased. Treat people without regards to race in personal life, but also public policy, end quote. And so I believe this is a topic that should not be partisan. There should be a bipartisan topic. And especially when you really listen to the iconic speech of MLK and revisit that opening quote. You know, both the right and the left should agree. You know, this I don't see race that Mr. Hughes points out. Well, of course we do. But that's not the point. Let's dig deeper than that. I remember watching a while ago when I had a little political awakening, Tommy Loren going on to Trevor Noah's show, a left-wing show. Tommy is clearly right-wing. And she was being pressed by Trevor in race. And she mentioned that she does not see color. And Noah, of course, cracks a terrible joke. Oh, so you don't see the red light at a stoplight then or whatever? Or you don't see the red in a stoplight? Something like that. Whatever. He's trying to crack a terrible joke. He's horrible. Maybe that's why he doesn't have a show anymore. Moving forward, I think we get it. I think Tommy should have gone a bit deeper onto how she really feels to really explain what she means by not seeing color. And this is what Mr. Hughes believes when he talks about color blindness, right? She does agree synonymously with being colorblind, but we can identify and recognize someone's race, but not let that be the sole indicator on how we should judge them and, you know, solidify that judgment. We are humans. We judge all the time. It's part of our nature. And I can see you're black. You can see I'm white. But what's beneath that that's more important? Character and values. Hence the MLK quote. I feel like we are really drifting away from this. And Coleman Hughes is more so against this new wave of far left anti-racism training that is occurring and woke kindergarten to children that he references in this appearance on the show, The View. And anti-racism, through his definition, highlights that your race is everything. And he compares this new emergence of anti-racism comparable to white supremacy. And this is a very triggering statement from Mr. Hughes. And no doubt this is probably how he got himself onto this show. Because if you mention anything that's similar to white supremacy, let alone something that's supposed to be against, white supremacy at the end of the day, but he goes deeper and highlights that they actually just go after white people. And if you actually listen to some of the people that are the front runners that lead this movement of anti-racism, like Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo, you read their books and listen to them on YouTube and interviews, etc., you'll come to find that Mr. Hughes, his statement of anti-racism is comparable to white supremacy. It seems pretty apparent. And he explains himself, and we'll get into that. And it seems extreme, but peeling back the layers, we're going to get into this. Peel back the layers. Whoopi counters and says, quote, "There is a reason for anti-racism. There was no black history taught in school. And equal playing field," end quote. And he can't speak on behalf of what Whoopi did or didn't learn in school. And all we have is our own perspectives. But it really does depend. We are in a country of many states, to say the least, many different segments and areas that can teach certain things and different things. And it depends on certain timelines. And, he says, quote, "What you learn depends upon so many factors. Where you're from, who exactly is teaching." And he mentions that he grew up watching The Roots in class, in public school. And so different cultures are all living in one culture. And this is true, end quote. That's a big thing we have to really highlight. I don't know if it's universally across the board, like we're hiding, the atrocities that did occur previously in this country. But how is it that we are condemning overcoming such atrocities that this country has done, which I think we should be somewhat grateful for? And it doesn't mean that we are ignoring the past and trying to hide it as if we're trying to preserve, white culture, which is kind of where Whoopi Goldberg is leaning in that sense, and definitely where anti-racism and that movement is in that sense, And so I think leftism doesn't dig deeper than that original statement, quote, "I don't see race," and especially when it comes to white people. There's always something that follows along this hierarchy of oppression. And I believe I'm stealing this a little bit from Ben Shapiro when he mentions this hierarchy of oppression. If you're a white straight man through the eyes of an anti-racist advocate, you're at the top of the pyramid. And then down to white women, black lesbian women, it just goes all the way down until you're the most oppressed. And I mentioned this before. Leftists are very open about these levels of oppression. And I think it's very extreme, and it doesn't address or solve real issues. And I think Coleman Hughes is exactly on the right path when it comes to this belief as well. And you kind of see this with the whole Caitlin Clark thing. For all we know, Caitlin Clark could be as left as it gets, and she's becoming very successful. But Sonny Austin on The View, when they were addressing some of the controversy that's surrounding the WNBA, Angela Reese and Caitlin Clark, etc., she even mentions that there's a thing called pretty girl syndrome, and I know there's something about it where it's because she's white and straight in this league that's predominantly lesbian and lesbian backed, but I don't know. I just don't think some of the disrespect that's going towards her name is very beneficial overall, especially when she's bringing a ton of attention to the WNBA. So even when you get your way and you start getting attention, they're going to find something along this hierarchy of quote unquote oppression. And I just don't really think it solves any issues deep down, okay? But that was a slight sidetrack. But moving forward, back to Mr. Hughes, he believes a colorblind society is a peaceful society. And he makes this great comparison to the North Star. He's not sure if we will ever get there and touch it, this utopian thought of just universal peace, but we should have an idea on when we are moving towards it or when we're moving away from it. Again, beautiful fucking analogy. And he believes anti-racism is moving away from the North Star. Okay? Anti-racism and rejecting the idea of being colorblind, the way he defines it, is our society right now moving away from the North Star. And he mentions this again with the woke kindergarten in San Francisco, Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. Look up all of that. And it's clear as day. If you are extreme left, this is something that is believed. And during the times of 2020 and BLM, I had a taste of that medicine as well. I had so many people online shut me down and literally call me racist things just because I was white. I couldn't have an opinion, and especially if I sided with someone who was black saying something that I agreed with, and there it is. Uncle Tom, Coon, all that stuff. Look back at my episodes with the Unveiled Patriot, early ones. I do talk about this quite a bit, with this argument going as far back as Booker T. Washington, right? And so the foundation, he explains why he believes white supremacy is similar to anti-racism. And the foundation, again, race/skin color, is the most important in this philosophy. And it is important in both parties. If you're talking to a KKK member or someone that is part of the anti-racist movement, first and foremost, your race and skin color is the most important. And DiAngelo says it, quote, he cites this, "To be white is to be ignorant," unquote. And that's crazy. It's a lose-lose for anybody that has white skin and is trying to understand or doesn't want to buy into the bullshit. Lose-lose. And so all he says on The View is, I want to call a spade a spade. We shouldn't teach our kids this. Okay? Skin color doesn't say anything about your character and your value. So we shouldn't make this the focal point. Hence, colorblindness. And so as we go further, Coleman believes that public policies that address socioeconomic differences is better and more beneficial to disadvantaged groups, and that race-based policies often hurt the people they are trying to help. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I definitely suggest you listening to my Walter Williams episode in The Unveiled Patriot on Rumble if you can, if you dare. But this is along the lines of that as well, how a lot of policies meant to help those who are disadvantaged does more harm than good. So overall, argument for Mr. Hughes is class focus. Socioeconomics, quote, is a better proxy for the disadvantaged. How do we identify the disadvantaged? Right now, we are casting a very limited blanket through racial identities, end quote. So if you are black, this must mean automatically you are disadvantaged, which in a broad spectrum isn't true. And not all whites are in an advantaged situation. And I am a prime example of that. Okay, I did not inherit anything, and I did not see any red carpets along the way. But hey, I have white skin. Through the leftist anti-racism lens, it doesn't matter. I am privileged just because my skin is white, and if I disagree, I am ignorant. Lose-lose. And so the minorities within these disadvantaged groups do not get addressed in race-based policies. And so I agree with Mr. Hughes on this. We need more specific socioeconomic focused policies. And I really do love Thomas Sowell's perspective on this as well. And if you were to ask a really extreme leftist, Thomas Sowell, again, is the godfather of Uncle Tom's, apparently, along with Booker T. Washington, which is just absurd to me just because they think differently. And so this is where we see the great Sonny Austin chiming in to try and counter Mr. Hughes' theory. And she says, quote, if you look at the socioeconomics, though, you see disparities between white households and black households. And quote, end quote. And so she's correct that there could be disparities, and there is, but she's completely leaving out a ton of factors that would lead to such disparity. It doesn't always have to point to racism currently because of disparity. And so she always says your argument is fundamentally flawed, but unfortunately, Mr. Hughes counters back quite nicely, I might add. And so it's along the lines of this. I will get to that in a second, but it's along the lines of what Thomas Sowell believes in his book, Discrimination and Disparities. Just because there is more male engineers than women, it doesn't mean sexism is the cause of it. And just because there's more nurses, there are more nurses who are women than men, doesn't mean there's sexism that is causing this, right? And there's more black men that are in the NBA versus white men. Does this mean racism is the reason? More white men in hockey versus black? You guessed it. A disparity does not automatically mean discrimination. We need more information and more factors. So apply that line of thinking here when it comes to poverty, income, wealth. We have to keep that in mind. We have to keep in mind of the population. There's a ton more white people in the United States. We have to look at specific areas throughout the country, specific policies in the past in specific cities that could further create this disparity. And this is very important, why I strongly recommend watching the my Unveiled Patriot Milton Friedman series. I go into grave detail about policies that do more harm than good. This is why I recommended earlier the Walter Williams things. Do these policies help the disadvantaged or not? It doesn't necessarily mean that racism is still alive and well and blazing the trail for this disparity. And this is Coleman Hughes' point. We have to have a better proxy to specify and focus on the issue at hand. And when you do it this way, focusing on socioeconomics, yes, we see this disparity. And so this is how he responds to Sonny Austin. With the socioeconomic route, we can address everyone in poverty. Everyone. Even if there's a disparity and there's higher blacks, browns, whatever in that category, we now don't leave out the poor white minority, which does exist. And when we point at the rich and wealthy white, we can't conveniently ignore colored people who are successful as well. And I say colored because there are black successful people. There are successful Mexican people. There are successful Indian and Asian people in America that aren't white. Okay, so we're addressing the issue across the board by class. And they have an argument about Martin Luther King's book on how to address this that backs that opening quote. How Martin Luther King has a class approach as well, not a race-based quote, not a race-based approach. Okay, and this is just the facts. Okay, so overall, addressing class issues is a much better route, in my opinion, and Mr. Hughes, than just some broad-based racism policies, right? It's a better strategy to target as a whole. And this is the topic, but of course, in this quote-unquote interview, Sonny Austin then changes the subject. As if she had an agenda, go figure. This is how the left works. But she came in there ready to ambush. Never met him in his life, or this is what he says on Joe Rogan after this appearance on the show, that he's never met this woman, and he feels she came in with an agenda. She comes in and changes the topic. Quote, the argument for color blindness has been co-opted by the right. Many in the black community, if I'm being honest with you, believe you are being used as a pawn by the right and you are a charlatan of sorts. End quote. I hate when people kind of reference other people like, oh, this community thinks this of you. But in reality, she should just grab her balls and just tell her or tell him herself that she thinks she's a pawn, that he's a pawn for the right, that she thinks he's a charlatan. You know, if you're going to bring this to the table, then do it. And she backpedals like, oh, this is your chance to kind of, straighten it out, right? Okay, sure. A charlatan is a person who pretends to have knowledge or ability, especially in medicine or show business. So a pretender, a fake, a fraud, someone just being used as a puppet by the right. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Hughes is not a Republican or a conservative. She tries to make it seem like he said that in the past. He's like, nope, I've never said that. He is an independent. And just because it's highly possible that Republicans or right-wing people might agree with him on this stance dealing with color blindness and race, it does not make him, quote-unquote, co-opted. I hate this shit. He's insanely intelligent and seems very open-minded and looks at the issues objectively. And he has an opinion about it. Oh no, not that. And of course, he'll butt heads with those who are ideologically captured, such as Sonny Austin and many others on the left, who are stuck in their beliefs, who don't come on this show to actually discuss with an open mind and find solutions, but more so just want to try to call someone out because they believe that their back pocket is being filled and that there's something a little bit more deceiving about them, some snake oil action or whatever, right? Like this guy's co-opted and just a puppet. It's ridiculous to me, especially when he mentions like you have no evidence of that. There's literally no evidence. So he puts her in her place. There's no evidence. Let's stick to the topic, especially when there's no evidence of me being co-opted. I have an independent podcast. I work for CNN, for Christ's sakes. I'm saying these things because I feel it. And that's what he says. It is obvious that Sonny isn't open-minded and doesn't want to discuss true solutions. And I noticed this when I started my podcast too. And the reason why I took a different tangent with this podcast, not only for my solo rants, but now I'm going to start my own interviews again, is because it really did weigh on me heavily. A lot of research is needed, watching both sides of news and pundits and intellectuals from both ends of the spectrum and debates and just doing research on history. It's a lot. And I don't know if you know this, I'm not getting paid for this shit. But I wanted to kind of veer into this today. I thought this was a very, very interesting topic. Feel free to watch the episode yourself. I believe it's it's about 8.5 minutes. It was very eye-opening. And then follow it up with the Joe Rogan episode of him and just do more research about this guy. Get his book, again, The End of Race Politics. And then now go listen and watch the music video, rap song, Blasphemy by Mr. Coleman Hughes. This guy is really, really talented. Okay, and I'm going to say a little bit of some quotes here. He clearly has stuff to say off of his chest in this song, but one verse that really stuck out to me is, all of it. I'll start from the top, actually. Let's just go into it just to close out this entire episode. Back with the pen, took a sabbatical at it again. Look at my attitude after they called me a Tom, a Ray, called me a coon. It's a 10. Bitch, it's a 10. Don't tell me who to offend. Losing a few of my friends. Yeah, I've been booted from public events, and it was all over something I said. And that's crazy. It's true. Next verse. Let's see here. Moving on down. I got this. Bear with me. You just saying shit for white people. You ain't hanging with the right people. I bet they keep you on a tight leash before they bring you out so you could fight people. Let me school you like Boy Q with the bucket hat, dropping your fucking Uncle Ruckus act. So there again, it's just literally him really spitting his mind and telling people what he gets on a day-to-day because he touches base on this topic so eloquently and really believes in it. He says this on the show, and it really brings me back to, the Booker T. Washington Du Bois argument. This has been around for years, and you'll hear people talk shit about Clarence Thomas, and I'm sure if they knew anything about Thomas Sowell, just throw him in there as well, Walter Williams, and I think it's absurd. These are all prominent, extremely intelligent black individuals, and what's more important is character, value, and honestly, you need to really listen to the ideology and the policies. Where exactly do they fall on this spectrum, and how do they push people and move people forward? Again, I really strongly encourage you to do some research on Mr. Hughes, watch this video on YouTube of him on The View, listen to him on Joe Rogan, talented rap artist, listen to the song. And then, at the end of the day, we just want things to get better and move forward towards that North Star. And I think it's just crazy that this black man who thinks differently on this topic when it comes to addressing poverty and our racism issues that have reemerged more than ever, in my opinion, today. I think it's just kind of a pain in the ass and disgusting. And that's a big reason why I really just veered away from the left. I just was never raised. I wasn't raised like that. You know, I look at people's character. The skin is literally the most superficial thing. And I don't think that should be the most important thing. Okay. Again, let's address actual issues to the best of our ability and move back forward towards the North Star. Treat everyone as human beings, individuals. God forbid. Please listen to that opening quote by MLK Jr. one more time. So please like, share, subscribe, all that shit. And thank you for listening to me and the Travis Masterbone podcast. And I look forward to you tuning in next time. Farewell.